everyone. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us today for our engineering panel. I'm Elsa, like the queen in Frozen, and I will be moderating this panel with my partner Wendy, if you want to give a wave. And we are both leaders of the Girls in Tech Club at Lick Mermaiding High School. And to start off, I want to inform you that this meeting is being recorded. So please accommodate now knowing that we will be sharing this video with attendees unable to make the meeting, and the images and clips from this recording with maybe like post it on social media and such. You can also email us after the meeting if you don't want your face to be in the videos, and we will censor you out. Otherwise, we would really appreciate it if you could have your videos on so that the speakers have faces that they can communicate with, and of course to encourage a more community kind of in this event, which we definitely want to kind of foster. So I don't know, Wendy, if you want to share the slides.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right.
So what will we be covering today? So we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So we will start with an introduction to the club and our wonderful speakers. Then we will start our panel for you to get to know the speakers, their roles and experiences, so that when we open breakout rooms for each panelist, you can hop between rooms and ask questions or connect. Then at the end, we'll have a fun raffle. So a lucky winner who is present in the meeting, has to be present in the meeting when we do the raffle, will get the USATEL prize of a USB. And we'll have 3 winners, the first getting 3 USBs, the second 2, and of course, a third winner gets 1. And afterwards, after the meeting, we'll email you and of course, coordinate so that we can send our wonderful USBs your way. So I'll pass it to Wendy, who's going to go over the norms and introduce our club.
All right, thank you, Elsa. We just want to introduce some norms for this space. The first being that this is a safe space. We are all here to learn from one another. We are all here to experience something together, and all questions that you might have for the panelists are fantastic questions. There's no such thing as a bad or a dumb question. And if you do have questions for the panelists, please do not direct message your questions to them because we might miss your question. So instead, send them to everyone. And just like Elsa said in the beginning, to make this a more communal space, we highly encourage you all to turn on your camera so that we can all see each other and feel more connected in this space. And finally, please mute yourself when you are not speaking so that we don't have any like background noise. All right. We also thought it would be a great idea to introduce what the Girls in Tech Club at Lick Wilberding High School does. Our mission is to bring female identifying people together, empowering and inspiring them to innovate, share wisdom, learn, and have a voice within the tech industry. Our members gain tangible skills in a vast array of fields, including coding, entrepreneurship, business planning, design, and more. Here are some examples of the projects we are working on this year. To start off, we have Safe Bites, a COVID-19 restaurant safety app created to reassure customers of the safety measures local restaurants are taking. Then we have Technovation, which is a global competition for teenage girls to design an app that helps solve a problem in their community. And finally, we have Minerva, an app that helps educate and empower young female identifying people. And it was submitted last year for the Technovation competition. All right.
Thank you, Wendy. And to add one more project that is a bit more recent, Hello Maker, which is a platform that targets youth to help encourage like the maker mindset, problem solving, and of course for families that might not have daycare to kind of have this platform that's free for youth to use, and youth being like elementary and middle school. So I want to take the opportunity to get to know the attendees that have joined us today. So at your own time, please put into the chat your name, grade, school, and something you're excited about. And I did actually write these down, so I'll put it in the chat so you can use it as like a reference. Otherwise, or in the meantime, I think we will get to know our amazing speakers that are with us today and whom I'm really excited to present. So Dina Mwangi, Meredith Heller, Mimi Mugen, and Emily Shaw. So we'll take the time for each panelist to introduce themselves by sharing the company they are currently or were mostly recently employed, their occupation, including a short explanation for people who may not be familiar with the role, education, and finally, where you grew up. Now, since we are on a time limit, I would like to ask that you keep your responses not or relatively short, so giving other people opportunity to also speak. So just in general, try to be like conscious with how much you're talking sometimes. So again, I'll also put this in the chat so you can use it as a reference. And then I think we can stop sharing, Wendy. And we'll start with Emily, if you want to take it away.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily. I was most previously at Airbnb for 5 years or 5.5 years. I was a software engineer for the first 4 years, and then I transitioned into engineering management, where I led a team of 15 engineers. And I very recently left to start my own company, of which I'm the CTO. And before Airbnb, I did my undergrad at Columbia in New York. And I grew up in the Bay Area. I'm from the South Bay.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. And also, what's really nice about Zoom is that we have these emojis, and I really like them. So I'm just going to encourage you to also use them whenever you want. So after Emily, can we have Mimi if you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Mimi. So I recently accepted an offer from a company called Splunk, where I will be joining their team as a staff technical writer. So technically that starts on Monday, so I'm still at day 0. But before that, I worked at a company called Century with a couple of the panelists here, and I was a technical writer there as well. So what a technical writer does, at least in the companies that I've been working at, is we write documentation for our customers or just anybody externally meaning people outside of our company, so that they know how to use our application or our products and features. And typically you just got to be a really good communicator, which I think we all know that's sometimes very hard to be. Education, I started off as a creative writing major, and I did do that for a little while. I did some ghostwriting, I got some grants, but ultimately I wanted a little more challenge in my life, so I decided to learn software engineering. And then I did that for a little while. I was a software engineering intern, and then I decided, no, I still like writing a lot, but I also like engineering. Let's put these two things together. And I'm really happy that it worked out, because I truly do love engineering, but I also wanted to feed my passion for writing. Okay, also, where did I grow up? I grew up in Southern California in this little city called Westminster, where it has an extremely large Vietnamese population that competes with San Jose. And yeah, that's me. I'm happy to answer any questions too in the Slack if you want.
Awesome. Thank you, Mimi. Next, we're going to pass it to Meredith.
Hello, I'm Meredith. Let's see, company. So I'm one of the people I currently work at Century, and I've been at Century for over 4 years. I actually started off as a support engineer at Century, and then I moved into engineering, which is what I do now. So I'm a software engineer on the ecosystem team. And basically what that team does is we do a lot of the integrations with Century. So basically other tools that you may want to use in tandem with Century itself, which is a developer tool. And let's see, education. So I majored in physics at Occidental College in Southern California. And then after that, I actually came back to the Bay Area, which is where I'm from, and I did one of the coding boot camps. So I kind of count that as education. Um, uh, and yeah, where I grew up. So I'm from the Bay Area. I'm from, if people know Piedmont, if not, it's a small town surrounded by Oakland, so East Bay.
Thank you, Meredith. And finally, Dina. Oh, take a second to sit down first.
It got a little windy outside. Hi, everyone. I'm Dina, and I am currently a software engineer at Pinterest, focused on the business side of the organization. I've been here for about a year and a half, and before that, I worked with Mimi and with Meredith and with Eva at Sentry, also as a software engineer. My education, I studied economics and worked in international development for a while, doing lots of like data analysis stuff for research projects, and I loved it, but I wanted to do something more. And I met Python in that job, and I was like, this is amazing. I want more. And so I went to HackRight, which is a coding boot camp in San Francisco. Sorry, I'm a little winded from the stairs. And I grew up partly in Nairobi, Kenya, and partly in Massachusetts. So just before 9th grade, my family moved to Boston, and I went to high school there and college all over the East Coast before I moved to California, East Bay for life.
Thank you, Dina. Okay, so for our first question, what technologies have you used throughout your career, and which coding languages or frameworks have you found to be the most helpful? And Wendy is going to put this in the chat, so don't worry, I know it's a long one. And I think we're going to start with Meredith, and I'll be changing it around so people get the chance to think about it while other people put on the spot right away. So make it fair that way.
Cool. So when I did the boot camp, so in college, I didn't do a ton of programming. Actually, I did take one programming class, and it was like an intro class to Java. I can't say that I remember much from that class. And when I went to the boot camp, each boot camp has a different language that they like to, or possibly two. So I learned Ruby initially with JavaScript, and the frameworks was like Ruby on Rails. And for JavaScript, it was React. At Sentry, the code base is all Django. So using Python, and the front end is React. So I do think React is quite popular, and I think it was really nice to have a taste of both like front end and back end languages. And I mean, JavaScript could be used for the back end too, but I really like Python, and I prefer back end work. So that's like a preference that I have, but I would say it wasn't that hard to transition from Ruby to Python. And let's see, most helpful. I mean, honestly, I think at a certain point, if you get proficient in one language, it is much easier to learn another one. And so what I would say is find one that you like. You don't have to like love it or know everything, but find one that you like working with and try to learn that deeply. And then you can apply those concepts that you learned to other languages. And some of them are a little bit different, but it's really good to get like a pretty good understanding of at least one. And I would say JavaScript is so helpful because it's really like prevalent now, and you can do a lot with it. So even if you don't want to do a ton of front end work, I think it's still like a good thing to at least know how to do like the basics of it, to understand browsers and stuff like that. So yeah, that's my answer.
Thank you. And for some of the frameworks, if you feel like it's not super popular, or that attendees might not know what it is, it'd be really helpful if you can give like a background, not super long, just like if you use it for mobile development, web development, backend, like Meredith explained, that of course is really helpful. So I'm going to pass it on to Dina.
Yeah, I also went to a boot camp that had a slightly different start from the job that I ended up working in. We used Python and used a really lightweight framework called Flask. And actually the maker of Flask worked at that job, which is kind of cool. But that was a nice little intro. And for us on the front end, At the time, they were doing just basic like vanilla JavaScript without any frameworks. And when I got to my first job, I met React and really liked it. And I think even though Python will always be my first love, I really like the front end and I enjoy working with React and the structure that it puts on JavaScript. And I like being close to the user as close as I can be. So I like working with user interfaces and thinking about how a user like works through the website and what they're thinking about and what the flow should look like. And I think one difficult thing with the backend is you do amazing, amazing work that supports all of the things, but it's hard to like visualize all the hard work that you put into it. Whereas with front end, you could be like, okay, cool, like here's the front end, here's the interface that I built. So I enjoy that a lot.
And could you add one maybe sentence or two about like the difference between front end and back end for those that might not know?
Yeah. How would you think about this? So the back end is more like the basis of things. So you can think about that with like that's where your data lives. Like you would have your APIs, which is like how your front end talks to your back end and like talks to your database that has all this stuff that you're using for the context of the front end. And the front end is more of like what you typically see when you're interacting with the website. But a lot of times like you need data and stuff. Like if you think about, I don't know, like TikTok, when you're looking at the app itself, like you see what it looks like, but it also has information about you and what you like and what topics you're into. And that stuff would be saved somewhere and that would be in the back end.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you, Dina. Emily?
Hey, yeah, I agree with pretty much everything Meredith and Dina said. For me personally, when I studied computer science in school, most of the classes were in Java. But when I started sort of in my career, I have worked in lots of different languages. I've worked across the stack, which you might also hear as full stack, which means you work in both front end and back end, which Dina just did a really good explanation of what each of those are. I've worked in Rails or Ruby on Rails is the framework. I worked in Python at Airbnb, mostly worked in React and Java. And I think I totally agree with what Meredith said in terms of once you learn one language, it's not too hard to learn another. I would recommend learning, one strongly typed language like Java, where you need to know, what is a number, what is a string, and then you can also learn a scripting language where you don't. It's a little bit more flexible and it's not strongly typed like Python or Ruby. And I think if you kind of cover those two bases, you can pretty much learn whichever other language pretty easily. Yeah.
So to paraphrase, as a beginner, the languages that you might recommend is Python and Java.
Yeah, I think maybe I would definitely recommend learning JavaScript as well, because that's a front end language and that would help someone understand sort of the front end a little bit more. And then on the back end, I think Java is a really good language to learn to sort of build your computer science and programming foundation.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. Okay.
Hi, sorry, did you say my name?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Didn't want to cut off Emily. Yeah, kind of like everyone else was saying, it really resonated with me. I agree with a lot of what everyone else said, but just to add my 2 cents, I also went to HackRight, the same coding bootcamp that Dina went to, and I have a love for Python, mostly because of HackRight. I appreciate Python because it reads a lot like English. So I often recommend it as a language to get started with, just to get your training wheels going. And then maybe if you decide to branch out, that's totally cool. Again, just like everyone said, I would recommend JavaScript because that is the language of the internet, well, at least web. And it's not going away for a while unless someone decides to create a browser, which if you do that, kudos to you. I would like to invest. So yeah, and I also want to solidify some other things too, just to maybe help connect the dots regarding front end and back end. I'm going to talk about it in like a non-technical way. So you know how when you go to a sink and you want to turn on hot water and cold water, that's your front end because that's what you're kind of working with, right? And that's what you see and you know how to push those buttons or those levers or whatnot. The back end is all the pipes in your house that connect to your water heater or just the main water source. That would be the cold water, right? So your back end is the one that's like switching on the hot or switching on the cold, or at the same time if you want like warm water. And I can go into more details too if you want to get even more complicated with this analogy, but just to help connect the dots, I know sometimes that's helpful. Yeah, okay. And then just to throw out one more other thing for technology, I kind of like, some people have like their favorite pen, right? My favorite text editor is VS Code. And I just want to throw that out there if you want a good text editor. But there's a lot to choose from and they all have pluses and minuses.
Yeah.
And, yeah. Those
Thank
are
you for
my
the analogy. That was really helpful. Yeah.
Mhm.
So that actually, I am curious. Can you raise a hand if you've done a boot camp before, from like your experience? Okay, so except for Emily, there seems to be a majority, which is all good. And I'm curious what your experience with the boot camp was, if one or two people can like just pitch in, and if you suggest it, like something you recommend for other people that are interested in coding, or so I don't really know who wants to take it, but Mimi, since you were the last person speaking, and then Meredith, since I saw.
Yeah. So there's lots of different types of coding boot camps that provide lots of different things. Like some of them will teach you multiple languages, and some of them will only focus on like one particular language, like Python, for example, with Hackbright, and a little bit of JavaScript. I like to ask people what they really want. And that's a really hard question. Like, what do you truly deeply want, right? Because once you figure out what you want, then you could probably decide if a coding bootcamp is right for you and which one. And maybe a good first question regarding what you want is like, what do you want to build? Like, do you want to build the next TikTok? Or do you want to build drones that deliver flowers to your grandmother? Because those are different languages. And all languages are good for different reasons. They do different things. So you have to decide like what expert level do you want to be for what particular thing. And yeah, I'm gonna hand it off to the other panelists because I can talk about this for a very long time.
So Meredith, if you want to add.
Yeah, like we've all went to boot camps like quite a while ago. And so I think at least so I've heard stories of some boot camps that are pretty terrible and like cost a lot and they're not really giving you your bang for your buck. So if you are going to go the boot camp route, do research on that particular boot camp because I think there are a lot now and not all of them are equal. So that's like the first thing I want to just like preface, like the worst thing would be going somewhere and they don't treat you right, or you're not actually getting the help that you need, or they don't have enough TAs for the students, but you're spending money on it. And the particular boot camp I went to at the time that I went, the way that it worked was you had a deposit, but then you basically paid a percentage of your first year salary once you got a job. So there was this really heavy incentive to get you hired because that's when they get their money. They've since changed that to be like a flat rate, which is how a lot of them work. So it can be a lot of money up front. And I think that's like really important what Mimi said, like, what do you want from this boot camp? And like, because there's so many different ones, like what is the language you want to learn? Or like, what do you want to be able to do at the end of it? But I think you can definitely do self-taught. Like, I don't think you need it necessarily. And they can be kind of expensive. So like, I haven't looked into them recently because like I went to one already, but I think just doing your research is really important nowadays for them. So that's just like my 2 cents on that.
For sure. That was really helpful. Yeah, for anyone interested in boot camps, do your research is the main header there. Cool. And I have one more question before I'm going to hand it off to Wendy, and she's going to ask a couple. What are some common misconceptions people have about your role and your industry? So we're going to start with Emily.
Yeah, common misconceptions. So I started out as a software engineer, and I think a common misconception about being a software engineer is that you're spending, 8 hours a day coding in front of your computer. A lot of your job actually, when you are a software engineer at a company, is communicating with people, writing technical documentation, working with your product managers or your designers to figure out what it is that you need to build. So it depends on which level that you are at a company and which team that you're on, but there were times as a software engineer where I was maybe only writing code for 30% of my day, and I was either writing docs or talking to other people for the rest of the 70% of my time. So communication is super, super key when even as a software engineer, you're not just stuck in a corner writing code. You are still talking to a lot of people, trying to figure out what to build and how to build it. And then the second thing, as an engineering manager, so I manage a team of software engineers, and I think one of the misconceptions about that role is that the engineering manager is deciding and has the last say in determining what everyone on the team does. A lot of the management role is actually fostering a team culture where people on the team feel comfortable enough to explain their ideas and to actually pursue kind of the things that they want to be building, and making sure that the team is being fulfilled and happy, and generally morale is up. So I would say those were the two sort of misconceptions of being a software engineer and then an engineering manager of software engineers.
Thank you, Emily. Mimi, if you want to answer.
Sure. So, yeah, so I'm a technical writer, and I think a misconception is people are like, oh, all you do is write all day, which I do a lot of that, but actually it's a lot of relationship building, because I can't really do my job well without the help of others in the organization, whether they be engineers or the project managers or the engineering managers. So I need to essentially like talk to a lot of people, make sure they trust me and I trust them. Everyone's on track. And not only are they talking to me, but are they also talking to each other? Because sometimes the product people will have a name for a certain feature, but the engineers will have another name. And I'm in the middle because I have to write the docs. And I was like, I don't have an opinion. I just need one name because we can't use two. That's confusing. What else? Yeah, I would say those are the most common misconceptions.
Great. Thank you, Mimi. Meredith?
Yes. So, I mean, I agree with all of that. That was something that I had thought about, was definitely the communication. And also, the more senior you get, the more of that is what you do. Like the less coding you do and the more, like if you're leading projects, there's a lot of organization, delegating tasks, all that kind of stuff. And it's really about your ability to communicate, keep all the stakeholders informed, lots of that stuff. So it's not just like the technical side. But one thing I do want to say about the technical side is that, at least this is something that I thought was the case, was like, okay, it's all about writing like the perfect code. Like it has to look nice and it has to be perfect. But really, like a lot of the code is like pretty ugly, and, or it's like legacy code, or there's hacks, or like, sometimes I'm surprised to see, well, the state of the code. I'll like be working on something and be like, how did this ever get shipped? But that's just like the reality. And so like, you don't need to produce the most perfect code all the time. It's really about your trade-offs of like, is this readable for other people? Does this make sense? And then also like analytics and like all these other things that you have to potentially instrument. So like not just like the functionality of an endpoint, but like, do we want to track who's hitting this endpoint and like all these extra things? So I think having a good sense of the product that you're working on and other products, like that's just going to make you a better engineer. So like code is actually just like a small part of your whole entire job. So
Thank you, Meredith. Dina?
I think a misconception is that, and this is something that I thought before I transitioned into tech, was that it looks one way, and it doesn't at all. Like engineering doesn't look like one way, coders don't look one way, and there's space for all of us, and it's a strength. I also, before transitioning into tech, thought it was extremely difficult and hard, and it's not. It's challenging like any other job, but people have been doing this, and it's not out of anyone's reach or grasp. Like it's stuff that you can learn. If you just apply yourself, it's stuff that you can learn. And what you bring to it as an individual, your background, that is going to help you stand out. And there's room for all of that, like across the spectrum. Like there's room for people who are deep in the stack and interested in, like, I don't know, infrastructure stuff or making sure like the internet runs. I am not that person. I care a lot about like users and the product and data and analytics and things like that. And that's what I bring to the table. And there's space for that. And I think in the beginning I was like, oh man, I gotta wear my hoodie and like wear black every day and like, you know, I don't know, whatever Mark Zuckerberg looks like that's what I need to look like. And that is extremely false. So that's a misconception.
Thank you, Dina. So Wendy, if you want to ask your questions. And thank you, everyone.
Okay, all right. The next question is, have you experienced working on an engineering team with only a few other women, or like being the only woman on the team? And what was that like for you, and what did you do about it? How did you overcome it? Mimi, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. So I used to report to one of the VPs of engineering at Century, but his general org was the infrastructure team, and it was all dudes. But it's you know, pluses and minuses with all things in life, right? Like super nice guys, but we, as far as like the work we did, we didn't always have a lot in common. I wasn't directly working on any of their projects with them. Pluses were if I had a technical question, I would be like, yo, you are my teammate and you owe me this answer, which is really nice. And they were really chill about it, which I was happy about. And there are lots of opportunities to learn with people who do things that are very different than you. Let me think what else. Oh, I was looking to see if you would put the question in the chat, because I feel like there was another detail in this question that I want to make sure I answer.
I think it's, how did you overcome this challenge?
How do I overcome the challenge? With a lot of affirmations and I'm just laughing because all I really want to say is like a lot of spit and vinegar. But it's about knowing who you are and knowing your value and bringing it to the table. And that's different for everybody, but it's an honest conversation you really have to have with yourself, right? And I'm really analytical and I'm a very good communicator. So one of the ways I brought something to the team was when I noticed one of my teammates was struggling communicating something that I kind of understood the gist of what he was saying. I would politely interject and be like, I think what you're trying to say is this. And that's how I would provide value to the team, right? And in certain contexts. But and then like it's like a give and a take, right? Sometimes they step in for me too to help out. But yeah, it's really just like know your worth. I know that's really vague, and it's vague because it's different for everybody. But like hold on to that. Like it's really important. Everybody has a lot to contribute.
Thank you so much, Mimi, for your wisdom. Dina, would you like to go next?
Yes. Plus one to what Mimi said about knowing your value. I think if you're working in tech, you have definitely experienced this. If you haven't, that's an anomaly. You're often going to be the only. And sometimes you're the only woman. Sometimes it's a different dimension. I've been the only Black person at a company. And it's very difficult being the only for many reasons. And some of them are external and some of them are internal, and they commingle. And I think especially when you're junior or when you're starting out, it can be extra hard because it's hard to know what your value is. It's hard to be like, no, like I'm bringing something to the table and I belong here. I think often there's a question mark because that's the society we live in. And when you're on a team like that, you're like, do I really belong here? Like, why am I the only one that's here? And having all of that like internal dialogue going on, which is not helpful. So for me, when I was there, I listened to a lot of Beyonce all day, every day. That was my anthem. And so Beyonce got me through a lot of that time, and having like really good allies and really good friends who can affirm you and like remind you, no, 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 you're doing a hard thing and you're doing great and it's going to be fine and this will pass. So that's really helpful. But I think for me, the most helpful thing was ending up at that point where I was like, oh, like this is the value I bring to the table. And part of that for me was ending up with a really amazing manager who was someone who is typically the only, and like watching him work and watching him take up space and just like killing it at what he's doing, and seeing him navigate the world as himself and bringing his full self, that helped me figure out how to do that myself. And so I think from the first job I had and the first role I had where I was the only, I've been able to overcome it just by getting the data and being like, oh, here are the things that I've done, here are the projects that I've done, here's like how I've contributed to teams, and being solid in that knowledge of like, yeah, I'm great. I don't look like the other people on the team, but like I'm great, they're great, we're all great. And um, knowing that myself, because no one can tell that to me, like, and make me hear it if it's not coming from me. That's been the way that I've overcome that.
Thank you, Dina, for that incredible insight. Meredith, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so before I got into tech, like I said, I majored in physics. And when I graduated, I was the only woman in my class. Like there was only 9 of us, very small school, but I was the only woman. And I was the only one for like, I guess my junior and senior year. So that was like not new to me. And if anything, I feel like that experience was a little bit more isolating than how things were in tech. And so I feel like I actually remember when I was interviewing, like I didn't want to start out being the only like female engineer. And so even though I was the first like support hire, there were already women working in engineering when I like joined the team. But since then, like I've worked on a bunch of different teams at Century, like it's been a long time. And actually currently I'm in a team where there is another woman, but there are definitely meetings where I'm the only. But at the same time, like I'm a woman, but I'm also white, and tech is very white. So I think that can contribute. So, you know, I see people who are not like me, but then also I do share something with them, and that potentially can alter how you're treated or how they assume things about you. So honestly, it just like really depends on the people you work with. And at the same time, like since it's been 4 years, like at this point, I've been at the company longer than like 95% of everybody else. And I think I've kind of earned some respect from people in engineering as well, because I've been there so long. And I don't know that I would get the same respect if that wasn't the case. I'm actually like not sure. So I think as when I was like starting out, it was kind of hard to assume that I knew stuff. Like I was always doubting myself, but like slowly I was like, okay, no, I'm gonna make a decision. I'm gonna make it, and it's gonna be, and we're gonna do it. And then if it's bad, then it's bad. And like whatever, I'll learn from it. The last thing I want to add is that I don't think I'd be in the place that I am now without having people who did advocate for me. And I think that's, if you join a company and there's no one who's advocating for you, like not your manager, not like another person on your team, I think it's going to be really hard, even if you do great work, to be recognized if people aren't paying attention. So like going back to what you said, knowing your worth, if people aren't recognizing your worth, then it's possible you need to go to a different company, because there will be people that do appreciate you. And you know, those people are going to want to see you do more and take on more challenges. So having that, I think, is really important.
Thank you, Meredith. Emily?
Yeah, I have some thoughts about this too, but I think I'll be echoing with what a lot of Meredith, Dina, and Mimi said. I think the first one is, imposter syndrome. If you haven't heard about it, it basically is a feeling where you feel like you don't belong, or you feel like you don't deserve to be wherever you are, and you feel like you're an imposter among like all these people who know exactly what they're doing. And I think two things to kind of combat that. One is absolutely know your value. You're there for a reason. And you got asked to be there for a reason. And the second is, no matter how confident someone else in the room or other people seem, no one really knows what they're talking about. Like, I think that is very grounding when you sort of realize that, and it makes those types of situations less intimidating. No matter how confident someone seems, they don't know what the right answer is. There's no right answers in most sort of like things in life, I guess. And then the second thing is, wherever you go, especially your first job or your in the beginning of your career, make sure you're seeking out a good support system, whether that's, personally with your friends, with your family, and at work. It ideally should be your manager and the people who are on your team. But I've gotten really good mentorship with people outside my team, and feeling like you are supported, feeling like there's someone advocating for you, feeling like someone will sponsor you if you want to do something, is super, super important. And also like ties back to you feeling like you're a valued member in whatever community that you're in. Yeah, so that's what I'd say about that.
Thank you so much. I think we are gonna transition into a 2-minute stretch break. So everyone can turn off their cameras for about 2 minutes and go get a drink of water, get a snack, or just, I don't know, meditate if you want. We'll see you guys back in 2 minutes.
Okay. I hope you guys had a good stretch and great song. Thank you, Miss Torres. We're just going to be coming back. So welcome again. And we kind of finished our first portion, which was a panel for you to get to know the speakers. And we're going to be going into our second kind of section. And I think Wendy, if you want to present that. Wendy, otherwise I can. Okay, 1 second for Wendy then. All right, or Wendy, you got it? Or I can do it, it's all good. So we're gonna be splitting off into breakout rooms. So this is why we asked you to have like an updated version of Zoom, because it allows you to hop between breakout rooms. And so we're gonna assign one breakout room per speaker, and you can go between the breakout rooms to ask speakers questions and connect with them, and of course also the attendees. And this is gonna be for 15 minutes. And so that you know, if you can see at the tab bar, if you don't know how to work with Zoom, it's the breakout rooms. And you should be able to see the names of each speaker. And that will help you know like which speaker is in which room. And we have 15 minutes allocated for this kind of breakout room activity, so that every 5 minutes, we really encourage you to kind of change rooms and to rotate and not stick with one room for the entire 15 minutes, because this is an opportunity to kind of learn about different experiences, and you do want to kind of learn about different speakers and their experiences. So we'll be kind of doing a broadcast of like, come on, let's move around a little bit every 5 minutes. So after 50 minutes, we'll kind of come back together and we'll do our raffle. So yay. And we can go ahead and start that now.